Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Rule Book Room. I'm Harp. Today's episode takes us into a fascinating intersection of personal law, consent, and evidentiary rigor. We're looking at a pre constitution case, but don't let that fool you. Its implications echo strongly in modern discussion on autonomy, gender justice, and the validity of marriage. The case we are unpacking is Mohatarma Ghulam Kubra Bibi versus Muhammad Shafi Muhammad Deen, decided by the Peshawar High Court in 1940. At first glance, it's a dispute about restitution of conjugal rights. A husband asking the court to compel his wife to return to him. But beneath that lies a far more fundamental question. Was there even a valid marriage to begin with? Let's dive in. The plaintiff, Mohammad Shafi, filed a suit seeking restitution of conjugal rights and an injunction against the wife's parents for allegedly interfering in the marriage. The defendant, Mohatarma Ghulam Kubra Bibi, took a firm stand. She denied the very existence of the marriage. Now, this immediately shifts the focus. The case is no longer about enforcing marital rights. It becomes about proving the marriage itself. Let's look at what the plaintiff relied on. A mullah claimed he performed the nikah, but crucially admitted no one was sent to the girl to obtain her consent. A witness vaguely stated there were two witnesses but gave no names or details. Two alleged witnesses appeared. They simply said they were present but didn't provide any description of the procedure. And they had questionable credibility. One was a neighbor and the other was an associate of the plaintiff. The trial court accepted the marriage as valid and granted restitution. The appellate court upheld the decree but removed the injunction against the parents. So, the matter reached the High Court. The High Court had to determine three questions. 1. Was a valid marriage, nikah, proved under Mohammedan law? 2. Is proof of witnesses alone sufficient, or must the entire procedure, including consent, be established? 3. Can restitution of conjugal rights be granted without establishing a valid marriage? Now, here is where the judgment becomes methodical. Justice Mir Ahmad doesn't just decide the case, he reconstructs the law of Muslim marriage step by step. First is the essentials of a valid Muslim marriage, nikah. Under Mohammedan law, a valid marriage requires offer and acceptance at the same meeting in the presence of two adult witnesses, free and valid consent of both parties. This is crucial. Marriage is a contract, not merely a ritual. Second, customary procedure, not mere formality. The court goes into remarkable detail describing how consent is typically obtained, especially in parda context. A relative goes inside to the woman, explains the terms of the marriage, including dower, asks for her consent in the presence of witnesses. Only after her approval does the ceremony proceed. This isn't ornamental, it's substantive compliance with consent requirements. The third aspect is failure of proof. That is the crux. Now, applying this to the facts, the mullah explicitly said no one asked the girl for consent. Witnesses gave vague, incomplete statements, didn't confirm witnessing, offer, and acceptance. The court emphasizes simply saying we were witnesses is not enough. The entire procedure must be proved, especially consent. The fourth element is that of age and guardianship misunderstanding. An interesting twist. The girl in the present case was 17 years old. Under Mohammedan law, puberty is presumed to be 15, which can be understood as age of majority for marriage under Muslim law. But the parties mistakenly believed she was still a minor. So the grandfather gave her away without consulting her. The court clarifies even if the guardian can contract marriage for a minor, the procedural requirements, especially witnesses, still apply. The fifth aspect to this case is elementary rigor in personal law. This judgment stands out for insisting personal law does not dilute evidentiary standards. The court refuses to accept vague testimony, assumptions based on custom. Instead, it demands strict proof of essential elements. The sixth aspect in present case is that of conceptual foundation, marriage as a contract. Though not explicitly framed in modern constitutional language, the reasoning reflects autonomy of the individual, centrality of consent, and rejection of forced or assumed marital ties. These aligns closely with latter constitutional values under Article 21 that deals with personal liberty and Article 14 that deals with equality under the Indian Constitution. Now remember, this is pre 1950 judgment. So there is no direct reliance on convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women or constitutional provisions, but the reasoning anticipates them. Modern framework emphasizes free and full consent to marriage, equality within marital relationships. This judgment, in its insistence on actual consent, foreshadows those principles. Now, let's crystallize the holding. A valid Muslim marriage requires clear proof of offer, acceptance, and consent, witnessed appropriately. Mere assertion that witnesses were present is insufficient without proving the procedure followed the consent of the woman. In the absence of such proof, no valid marriage exists, and a suit for restitution of conjugal rights must fail. Applying these principles, no evidence of the girl's consent, no proof of proper procedure, witness testimony unreliable, the result was marriage not proved, restitution claim dismissed, wife's appeal allowed, and husband's appeal rejected. This case does something quite powerful. It centers consent in personal law. It rejects patriarchal assumptions that marriage can be imposed. It insists on procedural integrity. Even without constitutional language, it aligns with gender justice, individual autonomy, and legal accountability. So, do we have any takeaways from this case? Yes. This case reminds us that a marriage is not valid just because it is claimed. It must be proved carefully, completely, and convincingly. And more important, consent is not a formality, it is the foundation. Even in 1940, the court recognized that a woman's voice cannot be presumed, her consent cannot be bypassed, and her marriage cannot be enforced without proof of both. In many ways, this judgment quietly anticipates the constitutional and international commitments that would follow decades later. That's all for today's episode. If you're enjoying these deep dives into how laws interpret personal laws with evolving principles of justice, stay tuned. There's much more to explore. See you next time. Until then, bye.